either dust-wise, fume-wise, or temperature-wise, so that it's in an environment where you're not putting at risk your components. The other important thing we're going to talk about is what do you use to clean it. Now, for demo purposes, I've got a bunch of stuff up here, and you didn't know, but you can participate in a little quiz today. So, I have here some BD alcohol swabs, or some what one singles. And I want you to think for a moment, which one would you use and why? I will tell you that I know that people use both, but I'm going to advocate strongly for one and be able to tell you why.
I've always used alcohol.
Yes, alcohol swabs are it. Ding, ding, ding. You guys are like already ringers in the class. So here's the deal with the alcohol swabs. They dry fast, so you're not introducing moisture into sensitive electronic components, but they also dry cleanly. It's not sticky. The biggest concern I have with like wet wipes and some of the sanitizing wipes that people use, some of that is sticky and it does almost the exact opposite. Not only does that gum up the keyboard and components and things, but it can really create issues later if it's corrosive. Now, let me tell you that the idea is to take these BD alcohol swabs, and for coming today, you each get a door prize. You get to take those with you. And we have a keyboard here. I'll put here. And basically what you would do is just take that alcohol swab and just wipe it off from the top. We're not going to touch anything that's got exposure to components. Not going to touch anything on the inside of the computer, anything like that. But what's going to happen is at the end, you're going to have a nice neat keyboard. Same thing with your mouse. Looking at a mouse, its most sensitive components are probably going to be on the bottom. And it is perfectly okay to wipe off the top. In fact, you're going to see on the next screen that I strongly encourage doing that. But I'm going to be careful to kind of avoid these track areas and avoid this area. I will tell you that this optical area is an area where you might want to use a little bit of gentle compressed air, because that may tend to attract some dust and can throw your tracking off a little bit. But again, we're not going to stick anything in there. We're just going to wipe that off. Okay, so I've introduced a little bit about using the alcohol swabs. The other thing that can be used, and here's your next trivia question, what about the monitor? I got 3 items here. I have a regular towel, I have a microfiber towel, and I have a paper towel. Micro, why? You guys are good.
It, like, I think it attracts the dust.
You don't want that. You don't have to worry about scratches.
Right.
Where paper, that's a paper product, can scratch the monitors, and heaven knows what the other stuff will leave behind.
Yeah. Sure.
In terms of lint, right, it's gonna have fiber. So if you could look at these under a microscope, you're absolutely right. This is gonna have a very crunchy look to it, and in fact it feels crunchy. The problem with that is that can scratch some screens. When we used to use the old glass screens, you could kind of get away with it. You'd have a little lint, but now with newer monitors, I'm always kind of careful with those sensitive screens because you don't want to scratch it.
You would still use the microfiber for a touch screen too, right?
Exactly right. Yep. Touch screens have components on the inside of them that you can't expose that allow you to be able to like press it. You know, tell me about touch screen can be a very sensitive screen where you're going to be real careful. Or it can be glass. You know, like the idea of the iPad type thing.
Yeah.
Just depends on which, but I would strongly encourage the microfiber for that too. Towel, the problem is if I take and swipe this across my black pants, you'll see exactly why. Lint everywhere. The other thing I like about the microfiber is if you're going to spray just a gentle bit of water on there, just to have it damp to be able to clean stuff off, it's not going to hold as much as this. So that you can clean it neatly, but not get too much concern about adding water. The other thing I would say is if you're going to use a cleaning solution like a Windex, be very, very careful to know what equipment you're dealing with. Some chemical products are okay. Some can be corrosive and damaging. And that's why I typically stick with water because chemically it's neutral. and you're not going to damage anything with that. And just use it very sparingly, that way you don't get too much streaking, and you're not worried about dripping. So I'm not spraying anything directly onto the equipment.
Oh, is it better to use like distilled water?
You can.
Versus tap, because tap water, a lot of times you have calcium and stuff that's...
And that's an issue where you might get some streaking and some water spotting and things like that. If you have distilled water, that's great. If you don't, the idea is you're using a mist and spraying just gentle enough that it shouldn't be a big deal. But distilled water is definitely recommended if you happen to have that in the house. Again, I really caution against a lot of the chemicals that are out there. People want to clean it like they clean their windows, and I totally understand that makes sense. But some of those chemicals can be really damaging, especially on some of the sensitive newer monitors that aren't made of glass. So, for that, we have talked about how to feel comfortable cleaning it and knowing what to do and what not to do. Now, one of the other things that I always bring up with this, and this is just a former nurse in me coming out, so why? Why would Deanna be making a big deal about the keyboard and the mouse? And it's a concept that I'm going to bring up from my healthcare background, and people that have a healthcare background, this will ring with them. It's the concept of the chain of infection. And the chain of infection is the chain that takes from someone having a simple cold, putting it on something, somebody else touching it, it getting introduced to them, and then coming down with the cold. Keyboards and mice, in particular, are what we call fomites, which is the technical term for the inanimate object that can potentially transfer a disease-causing microbe or a germ. Now, this is a big deal, especially if you're in an environment where keyboards are shared. That's one of the reasons they say in an office environment, it's not a bad idea to pick up a cheap box of the alcohol swabs and just wipe off your keyboard periodically.
Question for you. I used to work in a call center environment where the keyboards were shared, and they didn't have alcohol, but they had the peroxide Lysol wipes. Do you think that's more or less effective than the alcohol wipes?
Great question. It all depends on what specific microbe or germ you're going after. What I will tell you is I'm going with the alcohol wipes because as a nurse, we used those to prep areas for if you were going to do a simple blood draw. We also did the alcohol hand gel. It was proven and studied carefully to be 99% effective at breaking that chain of infection. It's very akin to the idea of doctors don't agree on anything, right? But doctors worldwide, regardless of country, regardless of specific training, will agree on one important thing. And that is the single most effective way to break the chain of infection is hand washing. We can't run that through a faucet. We can't wash it that way, but we can take an alcohol swab.
I would if it's an apple.
I'm sorry. I know. Well, and they're developing ones that you can wash, that you can throw through the dishwasher. They're completely rubber encased. It's kind of crazy where stuff is going. They're a little high priced now. And I can think of very specific environments where that might be necessary. You think like a medical processing lab and things like that. But I strongly encourage folks to be thinking about that from just a basic perspective, even in your office. I'll tell you, in a certain unnamed previous work experience environment that I had people talking about, yeah, last cold season was really rough, everybody got sick. And I kind of sat back and I'm Well, my nursing skill kicked in, and what I picked up on was the fact that it wasn't uncommon for, oh, we're going to a meeting, there isn't a keyboard in that room. Okay, let's go. And they were sharing keyboards, which also meant, unfortunately, if they weren't cleaned, or they just happened to go and touch something, it was very easy to share. And so that's one of the reasons to say these are important things at home. Now, you'll see on commercials, like the Lysol commercial gets me every time, because you see them spinning, I'm like, no! That's going to somewhat help, but that's also bad. Because Lysol is good at killing bad germs, but it's also slightly sticky. So the proper thing to do would be to kind of wipe things with a little bit of an alcohol wipe. And just be thinking about that at home too, especially if you've got family use. things travel in families, that's understandable, especially all the parents can relate. My little one was a germ magnet at one point, you know, especially as you go through cold and flu season. But that's why this matters. And the thing is, proper care of this, you'll get a longer life out of your keyboard. It's not uncommon to have to replace keyboards, but man, if they last a little bit longer, you can still read the letters, that helps. And that's what proper cleaning will do.
Is there something out there that's non-alcohol based? Because like I live with somebody that can't tolerate the alcohol, that it sets her lungs off.
Okay.
So like today she had a procedure done, and they had to put up all over, you know, don't use cavity wipes, don't use Perel, don't use, you know,
Okay.
because she reacts to it really bad.
Then I would definitely say stay away from the alcohol wipes if you have a medical situation
Right.
related to that.
But is there a recommendation?
I would have to know the chemical makeup. There probably is. I would ask the medical professionals like what they're using, because they probably have some protocol where they've got a wipe that's got something different in it. But without knowing exactly the chemical, it's going to be hard to know how that's going to react with electronics, or just even specifically on
I
plastic.
didn't know if there was other wipes that they use instead of the alcohol wipes.
There, I can tell you from my healthcare background, I'm aware of certain protocols when we might use one product over the other. I have not experienced that, to be able to say, oh yeah, in this environment we did this. But that would be something I might ask them, is like, what might they recommend? You're getting into a point where you might need to make a diluted solution, something like with a little bit of water and something, and do the best you can, but I would be somewhat cautious and maybe test it a little bit, because putting it on plastic like the keyboards and things like that, you know, a real damp, lightly damp cloth to clean it with like some hydrogen peroxide or something like that would help clean it. But you can see my concern there. That wouldn't be the first thing I would recommend. But
Because I know in the hospital there's a secondary chemical that they use that I've never heard of before. It's like benzoate or other. That's something that people like her tolerate. But it does the same job as the other things that they normally would use.
Yeah.
that are
the
alcohol
only
based.
other thing I can think of is, because it is fast drying, one of the simple things for you may be, like in your home environment, when you have that type of situation, when that person's elsewhere, do that, and then, you know, let an hour or two pass, and they would be okay, because it would be fast drying. I just wouldn't do it with them there, but it would depend on the person's medical situation and what their tolerance is, but that could be another way to kind of, you just would not be able to do it with them present because of the rapid evaporation and how that could affect their respiratory system that way. But if it's a situation where you can do it with them not there, later the environment's stable, they could come back in and not have any issues. They just couldn't be present when you clean it. Great question though. I'll have to find out about that, because that is an interesting one. I can tell you that when you get into all kinds of crazy environments, which is, this is a beautiful thing because it leads kind of into a little bit of topic of the next slide. I did throw in some information because I wanted to cover all bases. So I've got the extreme environment here. Like, I hope nobody has a computer that looks like that. Can it happen? Sure. I want to make you aware that, like, you know, people can do all kinds of things. Like maybe you've got a home business and you need the computer in the garage because that's where your workspace is, and there are all kinds of industrial applications. I would consider investing in some kind of protective covering. They do make cabinets and things that protect the computer itself that you can lock it in. That may be a case where it allows me to demonstrate the next thing. Most of the time, for the average person, I wouldn't necessarily be opening the computer. You shouldn't necessarily have to do that. But if you are in a somewhat unusual environment, this is where the can of compressed air becomes really handy. The proper way to address that is, typically it's going to be the back side where you're going to see a bunch of dust. And what I don't want to do is go, and gently spray it out. If you can't get the top off, and in some cases that can be proprietary, like the thing about certain laptops, they don't open up real well, but you can see the dust. What I recommend is to just kind of do a sideways outward motion so that you're kind of getting at it and stuff out. Don't ever do this and take and point the air in and blow it in, because that's blowing it in toward your power supply, the heat sink on your motherboard, and all the components, if you will, on the inside of the computer that can cause havoc. And that's making it actually worse. So always be thinking about a sideways or outward motion, if you can. One of the other important things, I'm big on pictures, and I put in the picture of the laptop. One of the things I learned in IT school, and I was just, they didn't really have to tell me this. I'm not paying hard-earned money for tuition for them to tell me this. Don't put your laptop or computer on the floor. Don't do it. Well, I had to eat my words, because a few days later, naturally at home we live. We do normal things like, oh, the phone's ringing, and I'm watching my mom put the laptop on the floor, and I instantly said, training kicking in, picked it up and set it up on the table appropriately. But be conscious of those things, and be sure to keep it up off the floor, because it is a step-on hazard. And I know how easy and tempting it is to do that. We do it without even thinking about it. We also step on things when we don't intend to. The other thing I got there, I've got in a couple of screenshots where I've actually got a slide of a presentation within my presentation, because they reminded me of school, and when they were saying blah, 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 this is a reminder to be thinking about your environment at home, and the fact that you have a computer that uses electronics. It uses electricity, and environments that are high in humidity, high in dust, are not great for getting the most out of your environment. So when you think about habits like smoking, heat vents, areas where you tend to get a lot of buildup of dust just naturally because of the way the air circulates in the room, that would be something to kind of watch and maybe relocate your computer or laptop from that area. And I encourage people to think about this. We're all kind of familiar with, how many of you have been in like a computerized area where it's like, oh, it's kind of cool in here, and they've got everything tightly controlled. That's really the idea. And companies invest in those kind of environments when they got really expensive equipment, because it makes it worth it, and it gets more out of those servers and expensive equipment in there. Ideally, we should all kind of have our equipment in there. That's not practical. But what I'm saying is be sure to keep your laptop and your computer maybe not so close to the heat of the kitchen, heat of the fireplace, things like that. Maybe not so close to that drafty window and things like that. Be thinking about those things and how they're impacting your computer. Next is the demo piece, where I'm going to come over here and show you a little bit about software maintenance on your computer. And by software maintenance, what we're really talking about here is taking a look at your control panel. And this is what your control panel looks like on a Windows machine. And there's a couple of important areas here that I would like to draw your attention to help you feel a little bit comfortable with. The first area that I always recommend, that if you haven't taken a look at your computer in a while, this is a good place to start. And that's called Programs and Features. And what this is going to do is load up every program and thing you have installed on your computer. So this, over time, can get quite lengthy. What you're seeing right now is an example of an enterprise environment. We've got a lot on there. Your home computer probably does not look like this. I'm going to confess, at one point, Deanne's laptop, after having gone through 3 IT degrees, looked a little bit like this, and Deanne wasn't very good about, let me install and test this out for class, and I'm not using that anymore, so I can get rid of it. That's the kind of stuff to take a look at. The other thing that I recommend is to point out, with Windows Office in particular, they're going to a subscription base now, which is becoming really common. what you'll see a lot of talk about online is if you had one version and you do things like install the school's Office 365, what they tell you is to uninstall the old version first. That makes things work much better. There's less conflict that way. So that's why it's important, and these are the things that I'm talking about, keeping the pulse and a good sense of your machine. Other things that I see a lot of people have that we spend a lot of time looking at are things like GoToMeeting, Facebook add-ons, you name it. The little things that oh yeah, I want to do that, so I install it, but it was for a one-time thing or maybe a one-time chat and I don't want it anymore. That's the stuff to target to uninstall. The beauty of this is it's really easy to uninstall. So we're going to pick on Project Professional for the moment, and I'm going to pretend that I want to uninstall it. It's literally as simple as selecting what you know you want to get rid of, right-clicking, and click Uninstall. Give it a moment to run its process, and it's done. This is something else gives me another idea there. We've got Logitech on there. The Logitech mouse. You get a different wireless mouse, it's probably going to have maybe a little different set of drivers or small software that are loaded on there. When you switch that, you can clean off the old one. So this is one of those important things to keep clean. The other important thing that I like to show people is this thing called Credential Manager. Now you're going to see in a little bit when I tell you, please, please, please don't ever click the save and remember my password. Not a good idea for a lot of security reasons, but do I know that we're all human and there's certain conveniences to that and people do that? It's your home computer. You're allowed to pick your own cup of coffee if you know what I'm saying. So people will do that. But what I also say is it's important to come here. This is an example of one that's completely blank. If there were something listed, it might say something like Outlook, because if you logged into Outlook and clicked save and remember my password, you would simply look for the area where it says add or remove, right-click to remove, and remove from Vault, and it goes away. You can't get in any trouble with that, because if you decide later, no, I didn't want to do that, it's okay, because the next time you log into Outlook, you can just click remember my password again, and it'll build a new entry. I also bring that up because you're going to see me talking a little bit about passwords and how important they are to your machine security. If you change passwords and you do this, you're likely going to need to get rid of the old one, and then manually create a new one. You shouldn't have to, that's not the design of it, but it's more common than not that you might. And so this is something else that I tell people, kind of keep in mind, if you're putting stuff in here, that means that that's giving whoever gets access to your machine open surfing. I can go to this site, I can go to that site, and I don't need to know passwords. That's an interesting concept to be thinking about, and that's where I say this is another area to keep a close pulse and a close eye on your machine.
Can you tell me what that icon is that's down here? Sure. Have to point it out. That one right there?
Excellent. This is for, if I'm not mistaken, the Radon settings. Radon settings, that is the video card.
Okay.
And some of the machines on campus. Not all of them have them, but some of them have them.
Okay.
That's
I asked about ATI brand.
Okay. I asked about that because like I recently had got my laptop cleaned by Wolfpack Techies, and that was on my machine, but I think it was corrupted.
Okay.
Because I had let my cousin download this like movie watching program or whatever. Okay. And I think it corrupted that because I was trying to uninstall that and I couldn't. It stayed on my computer even though I tried everything myself to delete or uninstall it and it would not go away. Okay, that's a great example. What I would say there is, yeah, it's not going to want you to uninstall and it's not going to let you uninstall because you have that video graphics card on your machine. And that gives you some Cadillac, if you will, features to being able to tweak that card and use some of the features that that advanced graphics card has. The average person,
Now, if in doing some viewing, some other stuff that was very similar, that conflicted with it, got installed, I can see, yeah. And things getting corrupt, it's just a funny way of saying, the way I think about it is they took a nice, neat, flat sheet of paper and went,
Crumbled it up.
or it got a little dog-eared, because why? We were using it a lot. You get a lot of users here with corruption issues, not because they've done anything wrong.
Yeah.
They call me and they're
They
very
told me
concerned, and
that
I'm like,
they
no,
didn't
you
have
are
a
a responsible computer user. You didn't, it just sometimes happens.
Yeah.
You use PowerPoint a lot, you use Word a lot. In that case, my guess as to what might have happened is that whatever they installed when they were doing some viewing, the graphics card wanted to get in play and be used, but there was something else there and they got in conflict. And it sounds like Wolfpack Tuckies were able to help you with that?
Yeah, they did tell me it was a virus on there. It did have a virus.
Ah.
They cleaned it off and backed it up and everything, so it's good now.
Excellent. You guys are beautiful because you're leading me right into my next topic, which is viruses. A lot of what I'm talking about is going to be like, okay, Deanne, come on, it's kind of dry, keep moving. But it's so important, and you're going to see why here in a second, to kind of get in here on a weekly, maybe monthly basis and just kind of what's my machine's normal. Because that helps you take a real good pulse on what's going on, and you will notice if there's something wrong, if there's something slightly different. So you're not going to be able to see much here. Why? Because we're an enterprise or large organization environment, and we control all that for you. We can't afford to take chances of machines getting infected, so we have an enterprise solution. But on your home machine, about 90% of what's being used now, especially in the Windows world, is Defender. Windows switched over to kind of making Defender their tool. It used to be you'd have to install Microsoft Essentials, which was an antivirus tool, and then they kind of got away with that and said, no, Defender will do it all. Well, I would tell you to do what you are comfortable with and what works for you and your habits. I've got a whole other presentation, and if you're interested in that information, I'm more than happy to share that kind of talks about what are the best antivirus software out there.
Oh, yeah.
I will tell you, I learned in IT school, don't pay for it.
Okay.
There's some really good stuff out there that's for free, but I will also tell you, as the security world has kind of upped its game, the vendors, like Microsoft, are doing a better job kind of building in those tools so that people don't have to keep installing stuff. But I wouldn't necessarily change what you're doing if it works for you. I would just let you know that Windows Defender is the place to look. Normally what you're going to see there is this option to scan. And you can do a quick scan or a long scan. I recommend going in and making sure that's current. A lot of times it's just going to run in the background automatically. If it's not current, get in there and run it and keep a close eye on it. That becomes particularly important not with regular use, but that time that maybe fabulous things happen and you go get to spend like, I don't know, 3 weeks in Tahiti. Wouldn't that be fabulous? You don't use your computer for 3 weeks. That's 3 weeks where it hasn't been on, it hasn't been connected to the network. It's going to need some updates and things. That's something I just tell people, kind of go in there and just make sure that it's current. Make sure that it doesn't need to be run. The other thing I'm going to tell you is if it's infected, what the bad guys like to do is disable stuff like that. So we don't want you to run that. We don't want you to know that it needs to be run because then you're giving us more open windows. So that's why I say it's just a good thing to keep an eye on that. The same thing, our machines don't give us access to this. Why? Because we take care of putting these out, much to everybody's chagrin, as needed by Microsoft, but you typically see over here Windows updates. And as you may or may not know, about once a month on Tuesday, Microsoft Tuesdays where they kick out their updates. The updates are extremely important. These are security patches where Microsoft has said, we know this is what's going on, we know our system like nobody else, this is the patch, so that your machine isn't vulnerable, based on our system and what we know our system is doing for you. Those are important to run and important to keep updated. And that's another important area to check and make sure it's current. You're typically going to probably also have that running automatically in the background to the point you might not notice it. You probably are going to notice the monthly where it says, hey, Windows updating, or maybe we had that happen, you got to let it run its course. Yeah, that happens about once a month, but it should be current, and it's always good to kind of check the status to make sure you installed everything okay. that is some of the important stuff to keep an eye on in your machine. You can't get into too much trouble looking at that. In fact, I strongly encourage you to look at it. Nobody tells you that, but these are the things that, what's normal for my machine, and are there changes that I didn't say to do? And this is the importance of the control panel. Let's go ahead and bring this back up. The other things that I talk about are your internet browsing habits. And what I will tell you is that enjoy your computer, let it do for you what you want to do, but keep an eye on your browsers. Those are another area to kind of keep an eye on. What have I got in there for add-ons? What have I got in there that's saved as cookies and cache and temporary files? And go in and clean that out every now and then. You're not going to have to do that as regularly, but you're also going to notice that if you happen to get a bad day where somebody's site is down, you might need to go clear the cache because it'll try and temporarily memorize, hey, they just asked me to do that, and I'll go do that exact same thing again, and guess what? It's going to serve you that site not available, even though it might be. You have to clear that out to actually force the computer to actually go process that request again. That's why I encourage that. The other thing is to keep an important eye on what's going on with the browser and keep it current. Recommend that you do some research on kind of what you use and use pop-up blockers and things like that. I'm going to tell you that there's no hard, fast rule on that because how many of us have ever been, I need to do X, Y, Z, but it says disable the pop-up blocker because it's going to pop stuff up for you. You know that that's something deliberate that you're doing and that's okay because you trust that site. That's the time to go in and disable your pop-up blocker to do what you need to do, but also remember to go enable it when you're done.
So don't most of those have like exceptions where you could, if it's a site that you need the pop-up, that you could just put that site in the exceptions?
Yes.
So it's always running except for when you go to those sites?
Exactly. Many of them will. That's another thing to be able to do as well. It depends on what browser you're using. The browsers are getting savvier about making life easier for us that way. So great point. I believe it's Firefox and Chrome that do that. But if you're using like Safari and a couple of the other browsers that are available out there, you might actually have to just go into their settings and do that. But those are important things I always recommend to people to keep an eye on. Web form information and safe passwords are something. Please, 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 please don't let websites remember your password. They're going to ask you. They're going to ask you all the darn time. And I always say, no, never, not allowed, not in this lifetime. I don't want my browser remembering my passwords, even to some of the simplest stuff, because then somebody gets a hold of my machine, say I leave my laptop in the taxi, somebody somehow cracks my password and gets into the machine, I've just given them open pass. They don't have to have the password to get where they need to get. And that's why I won't allow them to do that. If you do, again, be conscious to kind of go in and clear that out periodically. Same thing with web form information. We go online to do a lot of stuff. How many of you have done shopping online? Yeah, hey, it's convenient. I love it. I can go to Amazon, order stuff, and I don't have to go to the store. I can come home in like 5 days and stuff is at my door. Life is good. This is the beauty of what we do. But again, there's a lot of information that's potentially saved. It's good to clear that out as well. Windows Defender is, again, an important security feature that we talked about, as well as Windows updates. Pardon me. So those are important things to just keep in mind and check regularly, make sure things are running the way they're supposed to. And I primarily say that, unfortunately, the bad guys are really good at what they do. And they like to do things like disable things so you just don't notice that things aren't happening. And they can do stuff for a long time without you noticing. You're much less likely to have a serious breach if you're kind of keeping track of your computer and what its normal is. I've got a screen here that talks about Windows Defender, Disk Cleaner, and Disk Defrag. I will let you read about those. I'm going to say that defragging is something that your computers are doing almost automatically. So if you've got a computer that's less than 5 years old, you're probably going to never have to defrag. Those of us that have a machine that's years old, every now and then I got to go in and do that, maybe about once a year kind of thing. I did also want to point out with this screen, I've got stuff from How To Geek. I love that site. It's a great source of information. The first one says, what is this process and why is it running? I encourage you to go to your task manager and take a look at what processes are running and go, what the heck is that? Is it supposed to be running? And then you can go to How To Geek and find out exactly what that process is. Now, is everybody familiar with process, or should I show you what that kind of looks like? Excellent. Let me show you quick. Because this is something else important that I really... there we go. So at the bottom of the screen, I right-click and I've got, every computer's got, a Windows machine's got this Task Manager. And I bring up Task Manager here, and I've really only got these two things running. Now, what I can do is do more details. Now I've got an expanded screen. Now I can see, okay, here are the applications running, but look at all this stuff in the background. And I don't expect that all of you know that, because when I was in IT school, I didn't have to memorize all that. I had to learn what the stuff was from Microsoft to understand, like, when I was doing things, what was normal. But that's where I love giving you the guidance to be able to go to, like, How To Geek and kind of check out. If you're really curious, you can also just take the name of the process and just Google it. And just say process, and it'll come back and it'll tell you what it is. And it'll probably tell you, oh yeah, that's the app I've got for this, or this is the thing I've got to use for my camera so I can edit pictures and things. And you'll be able to recognize it, and then of course you're going to feel much better about it. If it comes back and you'll find out that it's something that's not good, usually it's going to tell you really quick when you Google it, and then you know, hey, I need to maybe get the professionals involved here because I've got this on there and it's not good. And you're going in with a great amount of information to be able to tell them, I was just checking my processes, which is going to be awesome. And you want to say, this is the process I found and it's not good. Can you help me? And we can help you check out what's going on and clear stuff. You see, these are all normal processes, but look at all the stuff we've got for our McAfee. That's our antivirus solution on an enterprise level. You'll probably have a lot for your protection as well that you'll see on your machine. Let's get back here. Then I've also got ones that talk about device manager. Things like taking a look at your mouse, your webcam, and different things that you might have plugged into your computer. You can go there and take a look at that. That's sometimes times where you're going to need to update what they call the driver, which is just code for this tiny little piece of software that allows whatever the device is, say it's a webcam, to communicate well with the computer. And then I've got one that talks about browser extensions. So as you do add-ons and things to your browsers, that's another one to kind of keep an eye on what's running. And if it doesn't look like something you recognize, it's worth a little investigation, and it won't cost you anything. The troubleshooting resource piece here, I'm putting in, I love Tom's hardware in terms of being able to kind of look at, like, what is somebody, if I take my laptop in and put it on a professional's desk, what are they going to kind of know and look for? For you, as the average user, what I say is it's kind of like me. I drive a car, but I'm not like the folks on first floor that are in the auto mechanics program. They do fabulous things. They keep us safe on the road, but they know my car better than I do when it comes down to it. I can operate it safely, but I am not an auto mechanic. This is what allows you to take the intimidation out of having your computer serviced. You can go on this site and gather some information, and now you're taking it for service with a whole lot more information and empowered with that knowledge, rather than going and going, I don't know anything about computers, and I hope you're not going to take me for a ride and bill me for something that I don't need. You're going to walk in there knowing a lot more, and that's going to be a lot less mysterious. You're taking the mystery and putting transparency into what you're doing. And these are things that can help you with your home PC maintenance. Next, we're talking file management. Okay, here's what I'd love to take a survey of the room and What does everybody's desktop look like at home on their computer?
I have a laptop, so.
It depends on which system it is.
I'm going to confess, Deanne's a good IT professional. My file system here at work, it's organized because I need to be able to find stuff quickly. My computer at home, it's my thing. Man, I ain't spending time dealing with that. I got a lot willy-nilly all over my desktop. I don't have it organized nearly the way I should. Now, that started out just fine. But if my laptop is years old and I've taken how many classes and how many degrees now, I have a lot of stuff on there. Maybe stuff I don't need on there. What this is designed to do is to get you thinking about getting a system that works for you and taking the common color-coded list there of like the household items that you might have on your computer and translating it to this funky file system that looks kind of like a funky tree that those of us in IT go, oh yeah, I remember that. I had a lot of other file system and sub to sub and yeah. I don't expect that you recognize all of that, but what's going to look pretty simple to you is the idea that I have user 1 who has a My Documents folder, and within that My Documents folder, they set up a Finance, My Pictures, and Articles folder to organize things. That's the basic thing you want to create for yourself. Now, what I would say is, if you've got a lot of like sensitive stuff, like your financial stuff on there, don't label the folder Finance. Come up with a creative name that means something to you that has your stuff in it, but I wouldn't say, hey, come and look at all my important information here. That's why I picked that example. Some of the other stuff I actually said, like you can label it insurance and you can label it banking, and I'm like, no, don't make it obvious and easy for somebody to find. You want to keep it organized for yourself. But this set of articles that I've got here gives you something to think about in terms of organizing and keeping your stuff together. The one thing I did right in my folder organization is every time I started a new class, I created a folder for that. So I've got lots of folders with lots of stuff, but I don't have like what class was that for and what class is that for. All my stuff for one class is in one folder. That's the one thing I did right. Do I need to spend some time on this? Yes, and most of us do. That's why I put the little picture there. It's kind of supposed to represent, it's kind of like spring cleaning. It's not a bad idea to go in and clean that up every now and then. Especially if you have a family shared computer. For those of you that are photo buffs, I love photos too. I'm not as into photos as a lot of people, so I don't have a ton of photos stored on my computer. But if you do, they do take up space, and it's definitely worth keeping organized. And then if, hey, I multiplied and I had a spouse and children, and all of a sudden you get a lot of stuff on there to keep organized on the family computer, this is the kind of thing where I might be thinking about that. And feel free to take a look at those articles. I threw some of the better ones I found out there, and each of them I was like, oh, I kind of like the way they present this, or I kind of like the way they present that. The idea that you can read those over and pick what works for you, so it's kind of a grab bag of I like the idea from this one and I like this idea from that one, and put it together and create a customized system that works for you. Backup options. Okay. So, remember how I said I have this big old laptop that's old, but it's got all my stuff on it? What happens if something happens to that? That's a big problem. This is where the idea of backing up your computer matters. I'm going to tell you about something I endorse for the average person. And then we'll talk about options for maybe the not-so-average person. So here's the part that I love. I get to actually get people to get their hands on this stuff. This is what we call a standard hard drive. You look kind of at the back of it, you kind of get the idea. It's like a record player. It has movable parts. That's what makes it interesting. What I say about that is, it's not if this is going to fail, it's simply a matter of when these little movable parts are going to fail. Here is what we call solid state drive, what a lot of laptops have in them now. This movable part's not so great in a laptop that gets moved. Higher-end laptops will come with a solid state drive to protect that little wire that they know is jostling their laptop and things like that. These still have, they're supposed to be a little bit better. They're supposed to be a little bit more reliable. And what's got everybody geeking out about them is that they're supposed to be cooler and they're supposed to be faster. That's the thing about having stuff saved locally on your machine. It's saved on this hard drive here. Okay? When this fails, not if, but when, then what? It's failed. I can't get stuff off of it. It's gone. And that's, nothing makes me cry here more than when I have an instructor going, I have this stuff saved to the computer and I can't find it anymore. And I'm like,
how do you decipher, like, because I have an external hard drive right now that I just had the techies back up my stuff to.
Perfect.
So, like, when do you decide, or like, you know, that, okay, this is almost getting to failure mode, I'm going to have to transfer this to another drive now?
Great question. I have 4 regular hard drives that I used in IT school because they made us do proper management. So it was like some of my projects were like months worth of work. I couldn't start them from scratch and get them done in a reasonable amount of time. So I had 2 physical, kind of the record player style ones, and one went back and forth with me every day to school. And I had one at home, and once a week I would take and copy everything over from one to the other. Now I'm a poor student. So once I knew that that semester was done, guess what I did? I switched them. And so the one that had been at home, not bounced around as much, and was kind of cleaned up and didn't have anything but the stuff that I needed backed up on it, now became my take to school and use. And if the other one was still giving me a good life, I could use that as my backup, because all that mattered was that I had 2 of these with copies of my important things on them, so that if one of them disappeared, damaged, failed on me, I could get the important stuff off the other. This is an example of the newer style. This is a solid state one that I had to buy for my most recent class. And this is what I use. You can use the mechanical, you can use the solid state. I endorse the mechanical because it's cheaper. The solid state you're going to pay a little more for, and in my opinion, it doesn't give you that much more benefit unless you have to have one. And if you're getting involved with virtualization and things like that, you'll know you need one. And then it's worth paying
between solid state.
An SSD or solid state drive. If you are one that uses a laptop and you love to travel with it, that would be something that I would tell you when you're looking at your laptop, that might be something to seriously consider. I will tell you that that laptop that I have that is going on a ridiculous number of years old, the joke behind it is I bought it before I got into IT, under the worst of duress, without knowing a thing. I got super duper lucky and picked the right machine that turned out to be a workhorse. It's still running. And I'm still using it. Part of the reason it's still running and I'm still using it, I didn't bring it back and forth to school with me every day. I kept it at home sitting on my desk simply because I didn't have to. When you're carrying your laptop around, they're designed to be portable by all means when you need to. But I caution people to get more out of your tech dollar, be thinking about if you really need to. And when you can, don't jostle it around and travel with it. On the flip side, I worked in a network operations center. We had your typical hard drive, but that was kind of a big deal because I was the operation and I needed to be able to get in and connect all kinds of stuff. That hard drive failed at the wrong room. That could be bad. They went to the point where we were carrying these around so much, they were looking at exploring getting us one with solid state because they were more durable. And if you're the road warrior type where you're taking it on business trips and things all the time, or you're running a business and going on sales calls and things like that, that would be the time to look for something like that. For your average user, I would just say consider something like this as a great policy to carry back and forth and then save the tech dollar. It's going to cost you probably at least a couple hundred, if not more, to get something with the solid state. If you want to put the money in and that makes sense to you based on what your needs are, perfect. If you don't, you can go this route and get a $75 external hard drive to carry back and forth and save the wear and tear. And give you that duplicate backup where it's a second place where things are saved.
Have they moved away from encouraging RAID type setups? At one time they used to RAID where they would take 2 hard drives, slave them together so the data was being written to both drives, and that way if one would fail, the other one would still be good.
Great question. In enterprise environments, not necessarily. That's going to kind of depend on what the business, the large business organization decides that they need. What he's talking about is RAID is a way to like take a bunch of disks and have stuff saved in multiple ways.
Oh, okay.
So you think about like large corporations that have large volumes of data, they'll build a system with something like that in there. And that's still like in a large company type setting. Yeah, they're going to go some way like that because it's cost effective for them as well. For your average home user though, not necessarily. They're just simply not going to invest in the equipment needed to set something like that up unless they happen to have an extra piece laying around where they can connect them and do something with it. That's why I say, like, for your average person, I recommend something like just the simple external hard drive is a simple way to do that. However, I'm fully prepared for all kinds of possibilities because there are home computers and we use them for all kinds of things, and maybe you are quite the entrepreneur and running a fabulous business. I've done some consulting for some small businesses, and one of the things that I would say is there is this thing called the cloud, and everybody's like, what's the cloud? There was a presentation done today that was fabulous about what's the cloud and why does it want my money, and everybody's talking about these things called like Dropbox and OneDrive, and do I need it, do I want it, should I use it? Here's my answer to that. It depends on what you're doing and what you need. For the average person, I like the external hard drive. It's a one-time purchase, never going to charge me again, I'm done. And I've got complete control of my data. It's nowhere but on my hard drive. The issue with the cloud is one, it goes up to the cloud, it goes up to the cloud vendor. Theoretically, and they're going to tell you how safe and secure they are, but I don't have it here. And that's something to be thinking about with extremely sensitive data. That's why some businesses will never do that. Others are okay with it, depending on the nature of the business and the type of stuff that they're talking about. If you're running a business and you just want your customer list and things, this may be a great way to have that second place to save stuff so that, heaven forbid, I hope this never happens to anybody, but you run a home business and then the home has a fire. Now what? The beauty of the cloud is it's an alternate physical location as well. When I talk to small businesses and talk about maybe you want to consider that depending on what you're doing, maybe you just get one of those and you take it to a safe, a Dropbox or a lockbox at the bank and secure it there and periodically do backups that way. Depends on what your needs are. There's an issue with sensitive data that you need to decide for yourself whether you're okay with it going up in the cloud or not. My famous example, I had a fabulous IT instructor who did this beautiful demo of Microsoft. Had a Surface and a phone and the instructor computer and said, isn't OneDrive cool? I can pull something up no matter what device I'm on. My point in that moment was yes. For me as a former teacher, if I had PowerPoints that I was creating for class, do I care if anybody else gets access to them? Fine, I don't know how interesting you're going to find them unless you're interested in my class, but no big loss. I think about the financial services firm that I used to work for where the data was highly sensitive. Even the training documents that I did, which were just simple, like how do you log into our system kind of stuff, not necessarily highly sensitive stuff, absolutely not. You would not even consider the cloud for certain things. And that's where I'm saying be thinking about your use and be thinking about if you're running a home-based business, the nature of the business and the nature of the documentation that you've got and whether you want to keep tight control over it or whether it's worth it to you to pay a little bit per month to have it stored in the cloud because then you've got that data stored somewhere else. But those are things that I always tell people really need to kind of feel through for your stuff. I did some work for a nonprofit. I put all that stuff on Google Drive. Loved it. It was like they could access Google Docs. I shared everything with them. They're still using it today. It's the coolest thing. The documentation I did, there was nothing sensitive about it. It was all like publicly accessible information. I just put it in a format to make it easier for training. Would I want like my banking information, my insurance information and sensitive stuff like that up there? No. And that's where I would encourage you to take a look at that. I did include most recent article I could find from PC Magazine, where they did kind of a, hey, here are the different cloud service providers, and the good, the bad, and what they didn't like about them, and what they did like about them, and specifically kind of a breakdown of some of their features. That is a current article. I've got the URL there, so please feel free. As I mentioned, I'll be sharing the presentation. You go take a look at that if that's something that you're interested in, to be able to compare the different service providers and what they offer.
Will you be sending out your slides to us?
Yep, I'll be sending you my PowerPoint, exactly. So you'll have everything that I'm showing you so that you can go read at your leisure, and as different issues come up, you can go take a look at some articles. The next one, okay, how many of you know that password security is important? Thank you! You guys are awesome. Like this big viral, like, please don't do this. Don't do this. I get, okay, I'm going to cut this with a little bit of humor. I found this online and I could not resist putting it on there. I changed all my passwords to incorrect, so that when it tells me it's incorrect, I know what the password is. I love that humor. I totally get it. The teacher and me love the chalkboard. I can't help it. I will use a strong password. I will use it. Yeah. Okay. So we know there are certain realities. I can tell you this. I was an undergraduate student back in the, let's just say many, many moon ago. Had a good friend of mine, nice guy. He was an IT person. And we were talking one day, and he was being kind of smart. He said, I can guess your password. And me being the secondary education, I'm like, I get that you're into computers and stuff, but no, you can't. And he said, I'll bet you a soda. Okay. He said, one caveat, give me 3 days. Okay. What he did was over the next 3 days, friends hanging out, having a piece of pizza, doing what college kids do, he social engineered me. Hey, what's everybody's birthday? Hey, I've got this pet. Do y'all have pets? You're a friend of mine, so I know your nickname, right? So 3 days later, I kid you not, he comes to me, and I'm about floored. He tells me the password. It was not exact, but it was close enough to be like, oh, he's not playing. This is scary. This is scary stuff. That's why I put that screen in there. That's the point. Do we put that stuff on things like Facebook? Sure, whether we realize it or not. We might not choose to put our birth date up there, but is somebody going to maybe send us a message saying, hey, good buddy of mine, happy birthday? Is somebody going to maybe send you a message and not use your formal name, but use your nickname? Sure. How about like things about like pictures of your pets and maybe inspirational quotes that you like and things like that? And that's why I say be thinking about something unique and fresh and completely different. Stuff that's not going to be easily guessable and not easily social engineered. Well, he social engineered me before we even had a name for that. But that's something that IT people know. And that's what the bad guys know. They know that they can go out and they can check out your Facebook page. They can check this down. They can find out a lot about you really quick.
I was told to, you know how they have like security, questions and stuff, like mother's maiden name and stuff like that. I was told to lie about all of that.
I always tell people when I'm doing things
the best way that like nobody will ever figure it out is just do not use the real stuff. Just lie about it.
That's right.
I was like, perfect. That works.
Pick whatever question you would like, and I always tell them, by the way, pick whatever response you would like that you will remember. Hint, hint, if it says mother's maiden name, maybe you shift it up. Make it something different, but something you're going to remember that's meaningful to you. And that's exactly why, because that stuff is becoming so readily accessible. Okay, so what I'm going to point out here is that a strong password needs to be a little bit longer. I'm also a realist that, like, yeah, then you're going to flag you can't use it, because the whole point is being able to get into stuff. I kind of like the model that we use here at the college. It's got to be at least 10 characters, a combination of letters and numbers, and at least one of the letters must be capitalized. You can choose whether you want to use special characters. That's what all this stuff is going, blah, 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 blah. I put that screen in there because What it does point out though is, so if you use an 8-digit character, it would take under 25 days for them to be able to just guess that, if they just put it in a cracker. 25 days they would get the sequence, and they would get it. Notice what happens if it's 15 digits. So my point is make it human, but don't make it like, here you go, have my password and do with my stuff what you would like. The other important thing that I always recommend to people is don't use common words. And you'll see in the articles that I've got there, I like the idea of the passphrase. You come up with a statement that's meaningful to you, and then you craft a set of characters, letters, numbers, that basically means that means something to you, that's going to help you remember it easy. It's worth thinking about. I realize that passwords are like, everyone's like, if I have somebody tell me, I see anything more about my password, I get it. I'm not trying to make you sick today, I promise. But I will point out that when it comes to home use, the world's on to us. They already know that we don't create a separate password for each account we've got. On average, we use 3 for just about everything. So all I need to do is get one key, and I've got the keys to the house and the Cadillac. That's why I say really give some thought to that. That is your first line of defense. And I encourage you to be thinking about that. I encourage you to be changing them up. We're now in a generation in IT where I set up accounts a long time ago, and all of a sudden they're like, oh, we've got a new security policy. You need to update your password. Because they said, okay, the one that we set before that said it was okay if it was 5 characters long. It was okay if it was a full word. Yeah, they didn't want to do that anymore, and they made you change it. Well, I'm not going to sit here and say, go change it every 6 months. Be nice, but what I would say is it's something, be sure to have a set of unique, fresh passwords, and don't use the same one for everything. Be thinking about your especially sensitive stuff, and be changing that up periodically. You know, most places do things like direct deposit with their bank. And it would not be cool if your bank account got hacked. And that's why I always say be thinking about that stuff. That's where the password, think about that like your house key. You don't give your house key to just anybody. And that's really what your password is. Password issues are a large share of what people run into with issues with their home computer, which is why I felt the need to, yes, I had to put a slide in, I couldn't help myself. That is a part of the home PC maintenance. It also leads beautifully into our next thing about savvy PC habits. Okay, so we talked about password, we've got that covered. So what other stuff do we need to talk about? Well, I'm going to give you my thoughts about that. I'm going to tell you that there's a lot of thoughts on the internet about it. I'm going to also tell you that as a person with a security degree, the minute I tell you something and it gets out to the bad guys that that's what we're telling them, now all of a sudden the game's over. They know they're going to go and try and match that so that they can fool you again. Couple different things that I did find important. One, the safe browsing one reminds you, go ahead and check your pop-up blockers, keep your stuff current and up to date, be thinking about that. And common question comes up, so which browser is the best? Well, in the wild, wild west world of the browsers, I won't sit here and tell you that there is one that's any better than the other. They all have their strengths and weaknesses. Currently, from everything I'm reading online, the stronger voice in what I'm reading seems to be saying that they like what Firefox is doing. And I was like, oh, that's kind of cool because I kind of like Firefox and use it myself. Does that mean that the others are unsafe? No. But it's something to be thinking about. I will tell you that there's a couple that I declined to use simply because I know that the vendors made a business decision to get out of the business. And I'm kind of questioning, then you're not going to spend a lot of money in keeping that updated and fully functional and really the same as the others where those companies are still, that's what we do for a living.
Well, who's that then?
Well, depending on the day, that's supposed to be Microsoft. I.e., they were like, we're done with browsers, we're not doing that anymore. Then they confused the heck out of everybody and came out with Edge. And
right, obviously because I hate Edge. Edge sucks.
Well,
I'm a Chrome person, but
And I can only tell you that it's Microsoft. They've got a lot invested in their OS. So I don't think they're fooling around with security, so I'm not going to throw them under the bus and say that I think they're sloppy that way, because they're absolutely not. They've got a lot invested in keeping their operating system secure. I'm just saying that I'm going with the ones that are doing the more current stuff with the browsers, primarily because they're keeping trend with what's being done in web development. I've got a tiny bit of experience with that, learning a little bit of parlor tricks with HTML. What I learned with that process is that there's a new generation of coding every so many years. They get better at what they do, and they get fancier at what they do, and they have more features and things. And I think right now, the one that's keeping them most current is Firefox. Is keeping trend with that. Everything else is still just fine. But to answer the question, like which one's best, I don't think there's a definitive, but I do hear stronger voices saying Firefox is in the lead. These next two pictures, how many of you know to look for little HTTPS and the little highlight? Yeah, that's going to be on my next page when we talk about common nets. Because the bad guys figured that out. That, oh, we looked for that and said, oh, it must be good. So they said, okay, let's figure out a way to mimic that. All it means is you got a certificate. Now, I did put up the picture of typing in the address is something important. How many of you hand type in the address where you're going? Or do you just go Google and look for stuff?
It's 50-50.
Okay, that's better than not at all. I love that. I noticed with myself that as I went through IT school, there was a sudden, subtle change in what I did. I used to like, blah, 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 bank, blah, 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 insurance company. Now, I've actually kind of gotten in the habit of hand typing in the address for my bank. Now, keep in mind that bad guys know you can mistype. And people will love to go buy the sites really close to stuff that's really common so that they can squat on it. Really sad situation. Unfortunately, a lot of times it's like with popular kids sites. Then somebody buys one that's a really simple miskey note next to it and puts like adult content on there. Not cool. But that's an example of like what bad guys will do. It's not foolproof, but what it does do for me is it makes me aware of what the correct address is, so that if I Google blah, blah, blah bank, and I look at the address that it's going to, I'm aware that that's correct, whereas maybe before, if I never typed it in, I wasn't. So there's an awareness piece to that. That is why I encourage people to do that more. I have a series of articles that will kind of talk about some stuff. What I'm going to simply say is this. Be aware of your habits. The most common thing that you hear IT people say is, please, please, please don't go click on random links. Ask my mom, I love her to death, but after work today I'll be taking a look at her laptop. She is a wonderful, wonderful woman, but she's also really smart. Meaning she likes to save money, so you put a little flash up that says, coupon, 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 click, every time. So that's what I'm saying, like, one thing I noticed about the change in my behavior as I went through IT school, I became a lot more deliberate in where I was going and what I was doing. Now, you're going to hear a lot said, and this is where I can't say, like, these are the 5 laws to safe browsing. There just simply aren't. But there are some things that you can do to be safer and be aware of. First thing, I've got Madison.com, USA.com, and NYT for NewYorkTimes.com. What do all those have in common?
News sites?
Yes. So here's a perfect example. I like the news. I'm a bit of a news junkie. I start my morning with a cup of coffee and check a little bit of news. A lot of people do. What's wrong with that? Nothing, except for that the bad guys love that stuff because they get millions of clicks a day. They get millions of people trolling their sites, so that you go and check out that site and read it. Is that going to be a potential source of problem? Yes. I'm not going to tell you don't go check out the news sites. There's a lot of sometimes important safety reasons to do that. I'm just going to say be aware that when you go to those sites, there's going to be a lot of ads, there's going to be a lot of clicks. Be careful. Go read your articles and keep moving. They do have a higher tendency to be at risk. And I picked that up because that's a great example. Well, do I not read the news? Of course not. Let's just proceed with caution and be aware, much like how you're driving your car. You're not going to not go through the intersection, but you are gonna look both ways and check the signal and everything beforehand.
I am so sorry, I have to leave a little early.
No
That's
problem
kind
at
of
all.
overtime, but-
No problem at all.
But thank you so much.
Did you sign in?
Yes, I did, yep.
Excellent, I'll be sharing that with you.
Thanks so much, guys, appreciate it.
You as well. So that is the safe web internet, and you know what, we're practically wrapping up, because here's why I threw in some stuff about the computer maintenance checklist. That's just a reminder that, much like how they say, you know, you're supposed to change your batteries on your smoke detector, you should typically do that with the change in daylight savings time. And I always say, get yourself in the habit of doing maintenance on your computer, whether you do it once a year, once a month. Here's some checklists to help. To learn more, there's lots of free access to stuff. How to Geek has one. Lynda.com, where you can get access to the library for free, has one. And there's a couple other things to actually take courses and learn more. And then I threw in a couple other cool articles. And with that, are there any questions? No? Well, with that, I'm gonna say keep learning and keep loving technology. You took the most important step, which is to take a moment to kind of keep in touch with what's going on with technology. I'll tell you from a security perspective, if I've learned nothing, that's the key to security, is just kind of keeping in touch with
Keep aware of, yeah. Yeah, because I took this figure, I want to see, are there new things that I'm not aware of that need to be, because it's just, like every time I see a major